in Victoria. Glass bottles and jars now go in your new glass recycling.
Through the intro, and then we'll get started. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. For members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you everyone for your understanding and cooperation, and thank you everyone for your patience as we sorted through those technical difficulties. And well done to the team for getting us back online. So firstly, I'd like to introduce the councillors attending in person tonight. So we've got Councillor Angelica Panopoulos.
Good evening.
Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening, everyone.
Councillor James Conlon.
Hi, everyone.
Councillor Mark Riley.
Good evening, all.
Councillor Monica Hart. And Councillor Sue Bolton.
Everybody.
And then online we have Deputy Mayor Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening, everyone.
Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly-Hannon.
Good evening.
Councillor Helen Pavlidis. And Councillor Oscar Yudiz.
Good evening.
I'd also like to introduce our CEO, Kathy Henderson, and we have members of the executive team here and members of our governance team making sure tonight runs. So first up, we've a full council here tonight, so there's no apologies. So we'll move on to disclosures of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Great. We'll then move on to item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes of previous meetings.
Sorry, Adam.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm with Councillor Conlon's motion, re the rates on investment properties. I have confirmed with the CEO that there is no conflict, even if any of us do happen to own any investment properties in the municipality. I'm just putting that out just to make sure that there's that's been made clear.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Yudiz. Yes, on to item 3, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 8th of May 2024? Councillor Davidson to move, Councillor Panopoulos to second. All those in favour? Yeah. All those against? Okay.
Primarily only because I'm still requesting the response to the social media to be included in the minutes from, I think it was the April meeting.
So Councillor Pavlidis is saying she's against because of the social media guideline response. Okay. All right. So, and any abstentions on the minutes? No, I declare that carried. Councillors, now we've confirmed the minutes.
Please. Ask for a division to be recorded. And
Oh, sorry, you're calling a division on that. Okay, sure, sorry. So we'll just do that vote again. All those in favour? Yep, so we've got Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos, Councillor Yudiz, Councillor Carly-Hannon, Councillor Tapanos. All those against? Councillor Pavlidis. Any abstentions? And I declare that carried. We'll now move on to acknowledgements and other matters. We have up to 10 minutes for councillors to acknowledge and recognise achievements of local individuals and organisations and raise matters considered important to council that are not already listed on the meeting agenda. Councillors, do you have any acknowledgements or other matters you'd like to raise? Councillor Bolton.
I'd just like to recognise, and I think it's important that we note, a very prominent First Nations artist who passed away, who came from the Merri-bek area, or originally her heritage is Torres Strait Islander, Destiny Deacon, and I just think we should sort of recognise that. She was an incredibly prominent First Nations artist in Australia, but also with strong ties to the Merri-bek area, and you know, I'd like to certainly see the Merri-bek Council make some sort of acknowledgement of her in the future, as well as me making a verbal acknowledgement tonight. I mean, she was, she was sort of like a groundbreaker pace setter in many, many ways, and with a very unique style of urban art. And I'll just leave it at that. But I think, certainly she was deeply integrated into First Nations community as well as the arts community and other communities.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillors have any acknowledgements or other matters to raise? We'll move on to item number 5. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pavlidis.
Thank you. Thank you, and through you, Mayor, and I'll try to be as quick as I can. Okay, as many of you may be aware, during my term in council, I have consistently advocated for transparency, equity, and better community consultation. 2 recent events or meetings have raised concerns specifically around transparency and equity. The first one is in relation to a hearing committee held last week. Like many of our community members, my understanding of the process is submitters are given the opportunity to speak to their submission at a committee hearing. The submission hearing committees are not live streamed, nor are they advertised as an open to the general public meeting. I wish to quote something from this month's agenda meeting, which is that in relation to this hearings committee, the Mayor was appointed as chair and myself and Councillor Bolton were selected to hear submissions. Authorises the Chief Executive Officer to set the date and time and occasion for the hearing of submissions committee meeting following consultation with the appointed councillors and submitters requesting to be heard. So nowhere does it say that this is open to the public or that anybody can attend. However, last week, permission was given to a member of the community to listen in or observe the submissions hearing. I wish to stress that this person did not make a submission, and this was confirmed by officers. This person is also a candidate at the forthcoming October elections. So my question is...
Sorry, can I just point of order? Is this,
yes.
This is the acknowledgements section, so I'm just wondering, what are we acknowledging here other than one councillor's grievances?
Sorry, point of order back to you, Councillor Angelopoulos. This is also other matters, and this is the matters that I'm raising.
So it's a time that raised matters considered important to council. So Councillor...
So this is considered... Okay,
I guess,
interesting.
Yeah, this is considered important to Councillor Pavlidis. So Councillor Pavlidis, if you could just quickly wrap up, keep going. Yeah.
Well, how much time do I have left considering I was interrupted? But anyway, this person is also a candidate at the forthcoming October elections. So my question is this transparent and is it equitable? If permission is granted to non-submitters, then why not make the public aware that anybody can attend and open up the meetings? While our governance rules don't expressly prohibit it, greater clarity should be applied. And can I request that officers review the election period policy to ensure there is a level playing field for all candidates at the forthcoming October election? My next reference is this is at a councillor briefing. Again, these are deemed confidential and closed to the public, but the minutes are available on the council agenda for the following month. At times we have external presenters, which is all good and well, but again, these groups, and I want to make this clear as well, I am not in any way implying anything in relation to these groups specifically or personally. They are requested to present by a councillor or councillors. I and some other councillors were unaware of this until I asked the question as to why certain groups or organisations are able to present to councillor briefings when others are not. The part I find interesting is that these happen to be the majority of during budget submission times. So is it a fair and equitable process? Nothing further.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Are there any further contributions under acknowledgements and other matters? Move on to petitions. There are no petitions listed in the agenda tonight. Councillors, do you have any petitions to be tabled on behalf of residents? We'll move on to questions of council and community statements. Time is provided for questions and statements. There's 30 minutes provided for these, and this time can only be extended by another 30 minutes by resolution of council. If we do not have time to answer your question, it will be taken on notice and responded to in writing. Priority will be given to questions and statements that relate to matters listed in the agenda. If time allows, questions about other items other than those listed will be considered. A maximum of 2 questions or statements in any combination is allowed per person, and questions of statements that relate to a matter listed in the agenda will be dealt with first. If you've registered to ask a question, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and suburb and then ask your question with preamble or background for up to 3 minutes. If you've registered to make a statement, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and suburb and make your statement without taking longer than 3 minutes. If you submitted a second question or indicated you have a second statement, it may, at my discretion, be deferred until all others who've submitted questions have asked their first question or not be asked if time doesn't permit. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and then we'll proceed to the next topic. If time allows, we'll return to the previous topic. Then either a councillor or a council officer can respond to your questions. There'll be no response or discussion in relation to community statements. As detailed in the governance rules, questions or statements may be disallowed if they're defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial, or objectionable in language or substance. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there'll be no further formal response. However, council will action any commitments made in answering the question. Tonight, we received a total of 6 questions and 6 statements prior to the meeting, none of which have been taken on notice tonight. So, at 7:36, I declare that public question and statement time is opened. And first up, we have on report 7.3, the O'Hay Street bike lane extension. Yep. We have Adam Carey from Coburg North Primary School appearing online to make a statement. So we're just waiting for Adam to get through the waiting room and appear in the meeting. Here we go. Hi, Adam, can you hear me?
Hi, Adam. Yes, I can.
2 Adams. We can't see you, Adam, so I'm not sure if you want to turn... Oh.
Hang on. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties of my own here.
It's the theme
Here
of
we go.
Tonight. Great.
I'm with you now.
Great. All right, so you have 3 minutes for your statement. So we'll start the clock, not to add pressure, but yes, please go.
Okay. Good evening, councillors. My name is Adam Carey. I have met some of you before through my work, but my statement tonight is given in an entirely personal capacity. I'm a member of the Coburg North Primary School Council, also of the school's Active Transport Committee. The Active Transport Committee is made up of parents who volunteer their time to run the monthly Open Streets event, which was set up with the council's support. Open Streets is a wonderful monthly event where we close off Bishop Street to car traffic for an hour before the morning bell, and students claim the street as a play space. It's a much loved event that would not be possible without the support of the council, of course, and we're fortunate to live in a council area that embraces active transport. I'm here on behalf of the school's Active Transport Committee to advocate for the proposed extension of the O'Hay Street bike lane. My school data tells us that Coburg North Primary is the largest primary school in Coburg, and indeed in Merri-bek with almost 600 students. The school has a really strong community culture of riding or walking to school, and anyone who journeys along O'Hay Street at school drop-off and pick-up times will certainly witness this. The shared path is a pedal-powered arterial full of children and their parents on bikes and on foot. Children from other schools, such as Coburg High, use the path just as much. But a significant number of school families live to the west of Sussex Street and don't have the protection and amenity of an off-road bike path. Some parents also must cross the Derby Street roundabout on their school journeys and have reported to us that it is a deterrent to riding with young children because it feels unsafe. We believe families in the western part of the school zone should have the same opportunity for a safe and active journey to school as those who live in the eastern part and use the current path in great numbers every day. The council's report on the proposed bike lane extension notes that it has been talked about for more than 10 years. This is a project that is overdue, and the committee hopes the council will vote to finally make it happen tonight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Adam. We don't have questions on statements, so feel free to keep following the meeting along at home, but we'll probably boot you out of the meeting room now in the nicest way possible. So we have Nicholas Zull next up to make a statement from the Merri-bek Bicycle Users Group, and Nicholas is here in person. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, councillors. My name is Nicholas Searle. I live in Glenroy. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Merri-bek Bicycle User Group with regards to agenda item 7.3. We're buoyed to see 72% of respondents to the engagement feeling positive about the office's proposed bike lane extension and support the recommendation to build the bike lanes. The extension to O'Hay Street from Sussex through to Irvine Street will close a gap in bicycle infrastructure that means families can now ride their bikes from the upfield shared user path to Pascoe Vale RSL without having to mix with cars and trucks. For building 650 metres of separated bike path, everyone can receive a whole kilometre worth of benefit as the two sections are finally connected. In addition to connecting two already built sections, having an uninterrupted connection to Irvine Street improves part of the Pascoe Vale shimmy route recommended in agenda item 7.4, which I'm sure we'll get to soon, further compounding the effectiveness of the office's recommendation. Further to this, we applaud the office's recommendation to ask VicTrack and the DTP to fix the dangerous upfield line crossing at O'Hay Street to continue the bi-directional path over the tracks on the south side of O'Hay. Many Coburg High students use O'Hay Street bike path to get to and from school, and the rail crossing is certainly the most perilous section. Thank you.
Stay there, Nick, just because you're next up as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, no, there's no questions on statements, sorry.
Statement.
So, report 7.4, Glenroy to Coburg bike route survey outcome. Nicholas is also here to talk to that, make a statement to that.
Still Nick, still from Glenroy. This time about 7.4, the Glenroy to Coburg bike route survey outcome. So Merri-bek Bug supports the office's recommendation as well to maintain Kent Road and Derby Street as the Glenroy to Coburg bike route, echoing calls from the community that was found in the survey. Safety enhancements along the existing bike route, such as speed bumps and much needed lighting in KW Joyce Reserve, will help to improve the ridership, and upgrades to wayfinding signage and line marking will aid vulnerable road users to travel between Glenroy, Pascoe Vale and Coburg. Additionally, we appreciate there is no silver bullet to transport improvements. As such, we find it encouraging to read recommendations 3 and 7 to write to the Department of Transport and Planning to request safe cycling infrastructure along Pascoe Street and Boundary Road, continuation, and to prepare a report on the bike network between Glenroy and Coburg under the Streets for People plan, respectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Next up, we have a couple of questions and a statement on 7.5 Victoria Street, Streets for People project. So first up, we have Pauline Carmichael, who has a question, who is joining us online. Hi, Pauline, can you hear me? Hi, Pauline, we can see you. Can you speak?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead and ask your question.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Should I just start?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Pauline Carmichael from Pascoe Vale. My question is in regards to 7.5 Victoria Street project. It was not hard to work backwards to expose the fact that this item, I believe, should be postponed until Council conducts community engagement as per its own policies. You might be thinking, why do I care? Because when I saw on the conversations page, there was only an option to vote on one of two designs and no other influence. I had deja vu of the bike lane trials that went ahead without prior community engagement. The amount of angst that lack of engagement created in the community should never be repeated. Council refers to engagement on the 10-year capital works program in 2022 as if there was engagement about the Victoria Street project. The fact is, Victoria Street was not a priority and letters were only sent to properties on Glen Lyon, Munro and Harding Streets, not Victoria Street. In a NOM about east-west bike routes in June 2022, there was no mention of Victoria Street. When the 10-year capital works program was adopted, Victoria Street was scheduled in 2829 and 2930 and mentioned that extensive consultation would be required on all projects in years 5 to 10. In the 2023 to 27 budget engagement, no change to Victoria Street priority. It wasn't until last year's budget that there were many submissions about more active transport. I looked at all 121 and I counted 20, not 75, according to tonight's report, that mentioned Victoria Street. Council's response to submitters was that this route was not identified as a high priority through the 10-year capital works engagement. I have no issue with it being pushed forward and don't deny it's a hectic road, but engagement on the 4-year budget does not constitute engagement on a major bike lane project. The Streets for People concept came up at the October 23 meeting in response to a NOM. The report says it will ensure increased buy-in from all user groups. Also says the Streets for People projects will involve more extensive engagement, including higher levels of the IAP2 spectrum. So along comes the conversations page for Victoria Street, the first Streets for People project. No consultation other than 2 predetermined designs to choose from. Only 370 survey responses, of which about 2% said they own a business on this section. 2% is not enough engagement with businesses, which includes a lot of sporting clubs, tennis, futsal, etc. Upon comparing the engagement to the future bike projects engagement policy under Involve, which an officer confirmed with me, as it wasn't on the webpage, Council has unequivocally failed to meet the requirements. My question tonight is, will voting on this report be postponed until such time as Council has met its obligations under its future bike lane projects engagement policy? And I don't know whether I can hear your response, unfortunately.
Pauline, can you hear me now? Okay, we've messaged Pauline to say maybe her speakers are down.
Right.
Can you hear me now, Pauline?
Well, I can hear you now.
Great. Okay, great. Okay. So yes, we've heard your question, and I'll just ask the Director of City Infrastructure, Anita Curnow, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, thank you, Pauline, for your question. Community engagement for the Victoria Street project did include engagement with local businesses. We hand-delivered letters to each of the businesses along Victoria Street, and we offered a meeting with any that had questions about the project. We had a mail out to residents and businesses within 400 metres of the project area. The scope of the engagement was guided by the endorsed position for Victoria Street, in that it would include protected bike lanes in line with the street's designation by the state government as a strategic cycling corridor. We developed 2 concept designs in response to that and provided the community with opportunities to comment on aspects of those designs and to provide broader comments about their aspirations for Victoria Street. Our community engagement policy states that occasionally our projects will apply different engagement methods at different stages. On the Conversations Merri-bek project page, we included a section about what could be influenced and what could not be influenced. We also provided information as to why aspects of the project could not be influenced. Best practice community engagement should be fit for purpose and depends on the scope and level of influence the community can have. Each project is different and therefore the level of engagement is different and cannot be predetermined. Our assessment is that we have not breached our community engagement policy.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Pauline, for the question. We had a couple of other people registered to make a statement or ask a question on this item. They're not currently online. If they do appear online, we'll come back to them. But given they're not here at the moment, we'll move on to report 7.6, Food System Strategy. Nat Aboud is here in person with 2 questions. Welcome, Nat.
Nat Aboud from North Coburg. Thanks for hearing my question. So I'll just give you the background.
obviously, yes, it is concerning item 7.6, which is the food systems strategy, which is going out for draft for more consultation, and will end up on conversations, which is great because conversations is good if you engage with it. So back in 2017, the food systems strategy was launched and said, our vision is to create a sustainable, just and vibrant food system. But unfortunately, since then, COVID and the economy and everything else that came with that has meant that it's been almost nearly impossible to achieve those goals. And in fact, potentially for some people, the opposite has happened. And the objectives of the food system strategy now would be much more directed towards actually helping quite a lot of people who are facing, great food insecurity, even more so than they were when this came out initially. And so then in 2020, a report called A Community Food Hub for Morelands North, Feasibility Assessment and Community Consultation suggested very similar recommendations to what I see in the food system strategy draft. So the reason I'm here is because I want to make sure that the food system strategy has the best opportunity to do its best work, which is that initial goal of a just food system and making sure that people who are incredibly food insecure have better access to food. So the questions are first that I'm asking, will council, when the time comes, commit to making themselves available to receive a briefing on the different programs involved in the Community Food Hub in the North? And specifically because the Community Food Hub is not a hub, it's a raft of programs that exist in concert to deliver, better outcomes there. When that briefing is offered, so that you fully understand exactly what that work is trying to do, and also understand what food insecurity is up there in the northern part of our city, predominantly, and also what can and should be done. And then the second question is, I'm asking if council will commit to further, or at least deeply investigate further funding the work of the food system strategy and funding the Community Food Hub in the North, so that it can legitimately address food insecurity for disadvantaged people in our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Nat. Do any councillors wish to respond? Otherwise, I can refer it to the Director. Yeah, so Director of Community, Eamon Famisi.
Thanks, Mayor, through you, and thanks, Nat, for your question. So we can certainly provide further briefings to Councillor on the activities that are happening in relation to the Food Hub and food security, and we do that on a regular basis as well. So happy to do that. In terms of funding, so in the draft budget, which is going to Council later this month, there's $130,000 per year to continue the work of the food system strategy, which rolls up to about $390,000 over 3 years in total. So that's in the draft budget for Council to consider in a few weeks. Thank you.
Next up, we have on Notice of Motion 8.4, speed surveys and accessible tram stops for Nicholson Street, Coburg. We have Helen Kratzman online. I believe Helen is in the waiting room.
Good evening, councillors. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Helen.
Great. Helen from Coburg. I lead a community campaign for pedestrian safety on Nicholson Street. Following an 8-year campaign, the state government announced $1.27 million for road safety infrastructure along Nicholson Street and Home Street between Bell Street and Albion Street. And at last month's council meeting, I asked whether council would conduct a speed survey along Nicholson Street after the infrastructure is delivered to measure the impact of the changes and also to assist with future advocacy efforts. Strategically, speed surveys provide evidence as to motorist compliance with the assigned speed limits, and this data assists council and residents to advocate for additional road safety infrastructure on state-controlled arterial roads. And residents really appreciate this data On arterial roads, there have been 2,519 road crashes in Merri-bek, leading to injury or death over the last 10 years. 346 have involved cyclists, 289 have involved pedestrians, and of the 16 fatalities in this time, all but one occurred on the arterials, 3 occurred within 100 metres of the Holmes Mall and Nicholson intersection. I would like to thank Council for agreeing to organise a speed survey after infrastructure installation, an agreement which I hope will be formalised by tonight's notice of motion. And I know Council advised it takes time for traffic patterns to settle after changes are introduced. In March 22, Council undertook a speed survey on Nicholson Street. This survey was conducted prior to the speed limit reduction that occurred on was mid-July 22. And then 3 months later, another speed survey was undertaken. So if it takes time for traffic patterns to settle after changes are introduced, what is the expected period of time for motorist behaviour to settle? Also, in regards to accessible tram stops, also covered by tonight's NOM, firstly, I'll commend Council's work promoting accessible tram stops on Sydney Road. Gives your comms person a pay rise. That's a brilliant little video they've made. In regards to Council writing a letter to the Minister regarding accessible tram stops, I remind councillors of Notice of Motion 6216, which notes that super tram stops at this location would have the added benefit of slowing the traffic down. Council did write to inquire about accessible tram stops and was advised that no accessible tram stops were planned for Nicholson Street for at least 5 years. It's now been 8 years, and given the continued motorist non-compliance with speed limits, follow-up correspondence from Council is past due, and it would be really appreciated by our community if Council could write to the ministers, including by residents of this property pictured behind me who had motorists crash across the footpath through their fence into their property twice in January this year, just a year or so after replacing their front fence after yet another motorist lost control and smashed into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I'll invite the Director of City Infrastructure, Anita Kerno, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Helen, for your question. And also for your insights relating to both the history and also ongoing road safety issues on Nicholson Street. The timeframe for driver behaviour to adjust to a change in the road network can vary depending on the scale of the change, the use of the road and other infrastructure in the surrounding transport network. In the case of Nicholson, Holmes and Albion Street and the associated road safety infrastructure changes announced by the state government, we would expect traffic patterns to adjust to the changes and driver behaviour within about 6 months of project completion, and that's when we would aim to schedule the after speed surveys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Helen. I believe the next person we had registered to speak might not be here. Is that right? That's right. So, do we have Terry Dalziel in person? Terry. Terry has a statement to make in regard to Notice of Motion 8.5, investigate reducing council rates for local residents and businesses. Welcome, Terry.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of attending, and just go up on my phone. I've got that. I wanted to talk this evening, or rather make a statement in relation to the proposed motion that's been put. My wife and I have been living in West Brunswick for a very long time, let me put it that way, quite a few decades. I'm disappointed that there's been a suggestion that there's a need for this motion in the first place, which is in effect to increase possible rates by landlords on properties they may own in the council area. We have a number of properties, we have a number of people who are very grateful that we provide the properties to them for rent, as distinct from an intention to buy and sell within a short space of time. There's a lack of acknowledgement here that people are not only wanting to move to this area to buy properties, but also to rent here because of the various services provided by this council and the accessibility to possibly their workplace in the city. We have one person who comes from Adelaide and has family over here, so has decided to rent a property over here, and she's been there for the last 4 years and will continue to do so. I think the suggestion to increasing the rates will result in an increase in property for first-time buyers may well be correct, but unfortunately there's a lot of other people who will be subsequently disappointed in no longer being able to reside in what is quite an attractive area. So short-term advantages in one area will mean other people will be disadvantaged. Also, just as a final point, I consider it quite inappropriate to be treated differently as a ratepayer from other ratepayers in this area solely because I'm providing property for other people to live in. That's my statement for this evening.
Thank you, Terry. Now, I believe we don't have any other people online who said they would join. If you were listening online at home and you were going to make a question or statement, you still have time to pop into the waiting room. We did have a question, I think, on the floor from a local resident. So, Nick, did you want to come and ask your question in relation to item 7.13, the Open Resolutions Report?
Hello, Nick Dolby, West Brunswick. And apart from times I squatted or was homeless, I've lived in rental property all my life. So anyway, on that, Open Council Resolutions Report, item 7.13, talks about 46 open resolutions. Now, when this report first appeared on the council agenda, there were many reports from a long time ago. Open resolutions, things that council had resolved to do, but still hadn't got round to it. This report lists for every open council resolution, and it says this is the action we're taking, this is the roadblock we're having, and so on. What seems to have occurred with this open council resolutions report is that councillors and council officers have been working towards finalising council resolutions. So my question to council is this true? Has this open council resolution report done, in fact, what it is purporting to do and actually closed, finalised council resolutions?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Nick. Look, thank you for your question. I think it is a new addition to our agenda this term, and I think your observations seem correct, that it's been a good accountability measure for councillors and council officers to make sure we're tracking, the decisions that we make and putting it into action. So appreciate your notice of how the resolutions have been closing, your fine attention to detail. Is there anything further people wanted to add? No, yeah. Appreciate your question, Nick. Thank you. Okay. So I believe that's the end of our the last of our questions and statements tonight. No more in the waiting room? Great. So we'll now move on to council reports, item number 7. The first report we have to consider this evening is 7.1, options to increase funding for the arts in Merri-bek.
Sorry, through the Mayor.
Sure.
Can I suggest, I know quite a few people would be waiting for the
That's right,
notice of
sorry.
motion.
Yes. 8.5, is that what you're asking?
Yes, if we could bring that forward.
Yes, sorry. Yes, we have a number of requests tonight that item 8.5 be brought forwards. This is a notice of motion investigating reducing council rates for local residents and businesses by charging higher rates for investments. Now, by agreement of council, we can bring that forward. I've had, I think, about 3 councillors' requests so far. So is everyone just happy with us bringing that item forward? Great, okay. So we'll do that. So rather than item 7.1, we'll begin with item 8.5, notice of motion. So this is Councillor Conlon's notice of motion. Yeah. So if you want to speak to it. Oh, sorry, and do we have a seconder? Okay, so Councillor Panopoulos wanted to second.
So I'm really excited to bring this motion forward tonight. So basically, it's a proposal that council investigate, reducing council rates for local residents and businesses by charging a higher rate for investors. Again, the ideal proposal that we've been talking about, which has still got some detail to be fleshed out, but the ideal one would be that we double the rates, the council rates for investment properties in Merri-bek, and at the same time reducing rates for everybody else, so homeowners and also local businesses across the council area. So in practice, that would look like, based on our average property value for a home in Merri-bek of around 800,000, that would result in a rate cut of around $900 a year for every resident across the municipality who's currently paying around $1,800 per year on average. So that is significant cost of living relief for homeowners across the municipality, paid for by charging those who can pay more, which is, people who own investment properties. I know some of them have talked about having increased costs, but investors don't go homeless when they sell a property. They're able to liquidize that asset and then able to pay additional charges such as higher council rates. So it's basically based on the concept of redistribution and progressive taxation. So what we're trying to do with this motion is to change the ownership structure of properties in Merri-bek. So at the moment we have around 37% of people in Merri-bek rent, and what this will do is it will make it less attractive to be a property investor in Merri-bek. And the idea behind that is to as less properties as property investors decide to leave the municipality, more properties will become available for first home buyers to buy. And that's a really great outcome. I'm sure everyone agrees. Who wants to rent in this country? You have no rights, you're subject to ever-increasing rents, and you have no security of tenure. So the idea is to really try to help shift that the proportion of ownership so that more people in Merri-bek have an opportunity to own a home. There is some, I've heard some critiques. So basically this won't increase rents. There's no evidence to prove that it will increase rents. Where this type of land tax has been implemented in other parts of the world, including in Victoria, there's a similar tax at the state level. There's no evidence to suggest that it increases rents. The fact that the property lobby is against it, who have a vested interest in rents rising all the time, suggests that this will actually be positive and will actually probably have the reverse effect and reduce rents. I'm running out of time, so there's a lot to unpack in this, but really excited to explore this, and I really hope that councillors a lot of us say that they support reducing rates for local residents. Here's an opportunity to halve rates for the majority of our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Councillor Panopoulos is seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. So yes, I'd like to second this motion tonight and want to thank Councillor Conlon for bringing this forward for discussion this evening. So I think that this is a really important motion that kicks off the process of investigating whether we could have that differential rate for property investors who've got more than one residential property in Merri-bek, whilst reducing the rates for residential homeowners and local businesses. This sort of thing and figuring out how we can work with the rating system is something that internally at council, heaps of us have been thinking about and talking about for years. But we do know that the likelihood of being able to change the rating system ourselves to do something to substantially tackle, I guess, both the housing crisis and the growing wealth inequality in our community, we know that the capacity for us to do that at a local government level is quite low. But I do believe that this motion is a worthy attempt to produce a report that outlines all of the options available to us and the potential impacts, and it puts it in the public forum and really helps shape the public debate around this sort of thing. At its core, this motion will bring back a report for us to consider in a few months' time. It's an investigative step. So in this housing crisis, I do believe that it's incumbent upon us as decision makers to look at all of the options that we've got available to us and to be as well armed as we can with information and options and potential impact and consequences. And that is exactly what this motion will be doing. I do also just want to mention, though, why such a motion would be brought forward and why it should be considered in the broader political context of where we are currently in Merri-bek, in Victoria and in Australia. So according to analysis by the Parliamentary Budget Office, in this financial year alone, tax discounts for property investors will cost the Australian budget just under $39 billion in foregone tax revenue. Over the next decade, this will cost the federal budget $523.9 billion. So it's clear that some property holders, some landowners, are actually being treated differently under the federal taxation system. We've got a broad-scale retreat from public housing at the other levels of government. We've got the Housing Australia Future Fund that spent $30 million on consultants and executive salaries and not built a single home. And we're living in a time when home ownership for people of my generation and for millennials and many, many others is becoming more and more out of reach, and the conditions that renters are living in are becoming a lot harder for people. And also for those who do buy their first home, they're often saddled with an incredible mortgage. So this motion is our council's attempt to seriously look into really creative and kind of out there ways to tackle the housing crisis, especially when the other levels of government aren't prepared to seriously take it on and phase out the billions of dollars that that landlords and property investors get in tax concessions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? I can see Councillor Yildiz has his hand up, and then I'll come. So Councillor Yildiz.
I'm speaking against.
Yep, go ahead.
Yep. I'm absolutely flabbergasted with this motion. In the last 16 years, I've seen some pretty bad motions being put up by councillors, but in the last 6 months, these have been more prevalent. All this motion is going to do is push people away from our municipality. I think if this does get through, there'd be a fair few investors. That's the average mum and dad will probably sell up and leave. Landlords are actually improving the rental market. They're providing rental for our residents. I'm really, this would have to be one of the worst motions. I'm speechless, but we need to identify some sensible strategies that are going to reduce rates. All this is going to do is just cost shift. But to punish one resident or ratepayer and reward another, this is not productive. It's definitely not cohesive. It's nothing but destructive. I mean, the state government right now is trying to respond to the shortage of housing. We should try to work with all levels of government to find sensible strategies to deal with that. And we need to focus on getting the core services that we're elected to do right. And I think punishing investors is one of the most ridiculous in basic economic terms. I think we're definitely not reflecting any fiscal or monetary policy here. And in fact, if anything, this is just dumb micro and macroeconomics at play here. And I think people are really getting sick and tired of seeing us in the papers and in the media for the wrong reasons. But this definitely, if this gets up, I think it's going to send a very clear message, and it will discriminate against those landlords who have worked very hard to invest in our city. And as the gentleman earlier said, the gentleman from West Brunswick, I mean, he owns a number of properties, he said, and he's providing rental. And there are some really, really good landlords out there that are doing that. And I just think that having such a ridiculous motion being put up at council, again, puts us in the media for the wrong reasons. And I think it definitely goes against all economic principles. And I think I'm hoping that councillors don't use this as a political platform to push their own ideology. And I'm hoping that if this does get up and a number of us don't vote in favour of this, that this is not used against us to state that we're against reducing rates, because we're not against reducing rates. Of course we want to reduce rates, but we've got to do it in a way by tightening the belt and look for and identify some really good strategies on or ways of reducing it at a council level, not externally punish.
Sorry, Councillor Yildiz,
punish hardworking investors. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any councillor wish to speak for this motion? Councillor Bolton?
I'm speaking in favour of the motion. The motion is really to explore the options. I mean, my personal view of the motion is, I mean, I think it's a great attempt to try and resolve some of the issues in terms of the housing crisis, but the limitation of the motion is it's looking at resolving cost of living pressures on homeowners, whereas it doesn't really deal with the rental crisis, which is probably what I'm more focused on, which is why I'm sort of favour looking at public housing rather than just fiddling with the market. But I do think this is, I think, you know, we can easily vote for a motion like this to explore options. I think that is needed because you do need to look at any unforeseen or unexpected consequences. And I think it is good that James or Councillor Conlon and other people in the local community are exploring different ways of, you know, trying to resolve questions in terms of housing. But I personally think it's got limitations, this particular motion, because it's sort of looking at, you know, fiddling with the market. But I think it is still, I think it's a good attempt to try and, you know, investigate what we can do as a council. And I think for people who might be alarmed about this, like people I just got a call before the meeting, I think the thing is this motion is exploring, you know, exploring the issues, and then it will come back to council. And, you know, people are free to contact councillors in that between now and then if the motion gets carried. But I'm comfortable supporting this motion, and, you know, I think full marks for sort of trying to think about this issue in a creative way, but I also think it doesn't resolve all of the issues.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do we have a councillor wishing to speak against? Yeah, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Mayor. I am speaking against this motion, and I'm not someone with an economics degree, and I don't profess to have a depth of understanding about differential rates. But what I do have is common sense. Let's start by making this point very clear. This is not a policy to decrease rates. It's a policy to increase rates for a specific group of people. It singles them out and will double their annual rates. Framing it as a reduction in rates for homeowners and businesses is misleading, and it fails to highlight
Point of order, that actually is the motion. It's literally what it is. It's increasing rates for...
So we have questions of clarification.
Yeah, but I guess that it's incorrect to say that the motion isn't doing that, because it is doing that.
Let me speak.
Yeah, so sorry, we'll go to Councillor Davidson to continue her contribution. Sorry,
Please
Councillor Davidson.
don't interrupt. Framing it as a reduction in rates for homeowners and businesses is misleading and fails to highlight the consequences and perhaps unintended consequences that flow from this motion. Not only does it disadvantage investors, many of whom are hardworking mums and dads and individuals who've decided to invest in property in Merri-bek, but it also seriously disadvantages renters. This motion assumes that every renter can afford a property, but just can't find one because of the number of investment properties in the municipality. This is simply not true. Everyone wants to or can afford a property. If we look at the current rental market, it's blatantly clear, as Councillor Bolton pointed out, that it's already hard enough to secure a rental property. Higher rates for property investors would no doubt be passed on to renters, and this would only exacerbate the current rental crisis. This policy would make it harder for renters to find properties. Tenants don't need increased rents or heightened competition. If investors were to sell their properties, as this motion hopes they will, the logic flow and effect from this means higher rates means more renters will be displaced. Individuals who are at various stages of their life who need a rental won't have a place to go in Merri-bek. You're effectively displacing a group of people who want to live in a community where they may have been raised, went to school and have families or work. This policy essentially tells them that the community that they want to live in no longer has space for them. Renters will be forced out of the municipality, especially those who can't afford to purchase properties or for whom rent better suits their lifestyle. So those are the unintended consequences with negative effects within our community. And under the governing guidelines in relation to differential rates, they can be used in circumstances for commercial or industrial land or farming land. These governing rules also stipulate where residential rates cannot be used. And a very clear guideline is that differential rates cannot be used to target a specific class of people. Here, this proposal seeks to target a class of people, mainly mums and dads who have worked hard and have investment properties. Now let's consider some of the unintended consequences of using differential rates through rules and legislation.
Sorry, Councillor Davidson will have maybe 30 more seconds given the debate.
I'll quickly wind up.
Thank you.
Use some examples. So say, for example, if you have an elderly parent and pensioner who needs to reside with you, perhaps for health reasons, they decide to rent out their family home, your elderly mother or father would also be treated as an investor. And their house would have to pay double their rates. That's inherently unfair. A further scenario, say for example, you decide that you can purchase a property in Fawkner, but you want to live closer to the city and want to rent in perhaps Brunswick. So you, as an investor, rent out your property in Fawkner. You are then paying double your rates there. That's inherently unfair. So common sense suggests
Councillor
that targeting...
Davidson, if you could conclude.
Yeah, I'm finishing now. Common sense suggests that targeting property investors with higher rates will not solve the underlying issue this motion attempts to address. Instead, it distorts the rental market, making it harder for renters and mum and dad investors, and creates an administrative and expensive nightmare.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Do any other councillors wish to speak in favour of this motion? Councillor Riley?
Thanks, Mayor. Some good points being raised in debate, so that is quite a complex matter, but ultimately I'm supportive of this in terms of bringing information to the fore about the complexities that we're dealing with. And never more important now, I mean, I've been advocating around home ownership and particularly for homeless people and particularly for people in public housing and people at the lowest end of the income stream. For decades I've been doing that. I've been doing that for decades, and so the big elephant in the room here, if I could put it that way, is the federal government and state governments and their withdrawal from public housing in the 90s. It was the Keating era that this all began with, or in fact, but the bigger problem began with under John Howard when he started providing tax breaks for negative gearing and capital gains incentives. Those things have driven housing, the price of a house and the value of a house up extraordinarily to the point where now it's 5 or 6 times the average wage to be able to afford one. It's out of reach of the average middle income earner I'm talking about. So the unintended consequences of this motion sort of put the light on the wrong part of government, in my view, and it's going to set up lots of arguments between people, like we've heard tonight, and thanks, Terry, for coming and asking you a question, that is going to have this big problem of setting up homeowners in Merri-bek arguing about who's going to be paying more rates than the others. So that's an unfortunate outcome. That isn't the problem. The problem is what has been done by ALP governments and Liberal national governments by not changing the negative gearing and the capital gains. And they also happen to give you a handout to be able to get your first home loan, and they'll give you a cash handout. That's another thing. So let's deal with the problems. But I'm more than happy to have this report to come back and explain the complexities of having a differential rate scheme, because we're going to have, neighbours shouting across the road at each other about how they have to pay extra rates because they actually, because of John Howard and subsequent governments that have sort of led them to invest in local property as a way of putting some of their savings into land and housing. Bit of an unfortunate outcome in my view.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do we have a councillor wishing to speak against this motion? Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I must say I'm not sure of the previous speaker was in favour or against, because I agreed with what they said in regards to the federal government's inability to sort of solve this over periods of time. But I'm certain that this motion is not going to solve it either. So I'm not happy to have time and money wasted on this, because as a councillor with some experience on the differential rates, I can tell you that it's very clearly against the protocols of the Local Government Act. It's unlawful. It's technically unworkable for this council. And in theory, it's also just unfair and will not achieve the outcomes that the mover seeks to achieve. And it is divisive. As a council, it's very simple to just say, let's vote for this tonight because it's just a report, let's get the information. But that involves spending a lot of money and officer time and legal advice to make sure we get it right. And I don't think that that would be money well spent at this point in time, just months out of an election. For me, this seems clearly a waste of officer time and money and nothing more than an election political stunt. It is unlawful. It's very clear in the differential rates are applied to land, not usages or classes of people, but classes of land. That's part of what's in the Act. It is impossible to classify investors as a land category. And even if we found some way to do this, some language to enable this, under the Act, it requires the minister to approve such a differential rate because it's outside of the legal parameters in the Local Government Act. And I say to the mover, have they approached the state government or the minister to actually seek an opinion on this matter? And I feel the answer is no. They've run off to the media instead and managed to get a lot of print, radio, and social media over the last few days, really showing their intention is not genuinely to adopt something here, but just a media stunt. It's technically impossible because we don't have the data. We as council don't have the data. And the data changes all the time as one person rents an apartment today and may live in the future here. It would be impossible to obtain this data unless we did it voluntarily. Asking people, do they rent out their property and would they like to pay double rates? Something that people are unlikely to adhere to and unlikely to be a fair and equitable system if it's not compulsory for all properties in that category. So it really can't be implemented. And in theory, I think it's the wrong approach.
Councillor Tapanos, if you can come to your conclusion.
Councillor Conlon hasn't solved the answer to the housing crisis with this. People won't stop buying investment properties because of an extra $1,000 in their rates. They will just pass that on to renters. The real losers from this proposal are renters. And that is a really unfortunate outcome.
Thank you, Councillor
of this
Tapanos.
proposal.
Do we have a councillor hoping to speak in favour of this motion? Do you want to put your mic on? Question of clarification?
Yeah, and I'm always interested in the debate that occurs, but I just noticed the sort of narrowness of the motion to some extent is not one that actually asks some of those questions of the complexities, but simply asks a more technical question, as the way I read it, investigates it if a differential rate is possible. So I actually see the motion as probably much narrower than what's being
okay, we'll take that as a
suggested.
question.
So
Thanks, Councillor
I
Hart.
would like a bit of clarity
Director
from the mover.
of Business Transformation, did you want to respond to that? Sorry. Investigate seems too narrow, whether it's possible or not. But the question is, the motion as it stands, will it actually delve into some of the complexity.
Complexity that's been mentioned here tonight. Yeah.
So the CEO?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the question. So if the motion is carried tonight, there's kind of two stages to the investigation that would occur. The first is investigating whether it's legal to do what's proposed. If it isn't legal, and that kind of is the end of that investigation, that if it did prove that there are ways to implement it legally, and I think that unlikely, but if it did prove that, then the investigation would be into how it might work, what the impact it might have on different members of the Merri-bek community and the ratepayer community, and what the financial implications of that might be for ratepayers and the financial implications for the council as well. It's very unlikely that what's contemplated in the motion of increasing rates on those that own more than 2 properties would fund a halving of the rest of the rate base. It's very unlikely that the maths of that would work out, but that would be part of the investigation if it did prove to be legal, if this motion was carried.
Thank you, CEO.
Thank you. That answers, yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, so do we have a councillor wishing to speak in favour of this motion? Or a councillor wishing to speak against? Councillor Carly Hannon.
I feel like most things have already been said, but I thought just to really follow on from Councillor Tapanos, I think all of us using common sense, as one councillor mentioned earlier, would realise that like land taxes have actually already significantly gone up this year. Our taxes are quite small compared to other levels of governments. Like, I know we go on and on about rates, but when you think about all the costs that go into an investment property, rates are a very small amount. So realistically, even if everything else were to work out in this theoretical plan, like a rental here in Merri-bek is between, like, for a lot of properties, between like $600 to $1,000 a week that the renter pays. So you can understand that a small rise of any cost would not change the outcome for investors. I think the debate around investments and rentals and home ownership and stuff has been an interesting one to have tonight, but I don't think that this motion tonight is going to actually see any significant outcome. Obviously, we've also heard that it probably would not actually even get to that point. So that's why I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion?
Mr. Mayor, I just had a question for the CEO.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the estimate sort of legal cost to get the advice required to prepare the report?
I believe it said it was under 5,000 in the report. So there's a financial implications. The cost of preparing initial advice investigating if it's possible is estimated to cost less than 5,000. Okay, so any other councillors wish to speak to this motion?
Sorry, Adam. Can I also ask, once we do investigate that, is there any idea how long the report may take to come back to council?
So the motion says to come back to the August or September council meeting. So yeah, the CEO would like to contribute.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, if the motion is carried, then we'll make every effort to bring it back to the August or September council meeting. If that isn't possible, for instance, because it's a very detailed investigation of how to make it feasible and what the impacts are, then it would come back following, in the next term of council. But we'll do our best.
Thank you to the CEO. Any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Hart?
Yeah, I've listened with interest tonight. If the motion is as limited as what it's been talked about, I'm not opposed to it. If it's a simple question of investigating the possibility, the legality of that, if you like. I can't pass a comment on the motivation or the intent, be it media or otherwise, behind the mover of the motion. I appreciate some of the wider complexity of the debate tonight, which does interest me, the complexity of what's happening with land and the implications of rents and that deeper, I think, debate. But that's far beyond what this report is looking at, I think, at this point. I'm happy to support it in its limited focus tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? We've probably heard from almost everybody. Okay, we'll move on to the right of reply. Councillor Conlon, you've got 2 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, so thanks for the debate, and I know it is a complex issue. And just to go to my motivation, I mean, I'm deeply motivated by using my powers in this kind of limited position that I have as a councillor to do everything I can to kind of help solve the housing crisis as where I can. That's kind of my sole motivation, and I think that is shown in my voting record over the last 4 years as well, and the kind of advocacy I do outside of the council as well. So just to be clear about why I brought this, and I appreciate and hear councillors' concerns and tonight, which it's good to hear. Like, and I plan to go and look into some more things in more detail. I obviously don't propose that this is going to solve the housing crisis. I mean, that's obviously a ludicrous idea. Like, this is supposed to be a small contribution to a much bigger macroeconomic problem. And it's about what this is trying to do is introduce a little bit of fairness into a really unfair system, which we all acknowledge is unfair. And we all acknowledge that it's not right that investors they are part of the problem. I'm not saying they're all evil, and I know the whole system is geared towards people investing in property because of the welfare system is being eroded. And I hear those concerns. So this is not sort of targeting those people who have an investment property as a kind of financial mechanism or financial security mechanism. It is targeted towards more the greedy property investors who are hoarding properties and causing increasing the rents, as everyone has talked about. So I'm also interested in what exceptions we might be able to make. I know we have a very blunt instrument at our disposal, but hopefully there are might be some exceptions that we can make for some of the examples brought up by, say, Councillor Davidson and Councillor Hart and some of the people here tonight. But ultimately, I think councillors should vote for this. It's politically courageous not to. 2/3 of the municipality are owner-occupiers. So if you vote against this, you're siding with property investors and denying around a $900 per year annual rate cut to every resident in the municipality. I think that's a really politically courageous thing to do.
We'll move on to a vote on this item. So all those in favour? I'll just call a division on this straight away. So calling divisions. So Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon and Councillor Panopoulos voting in favour. All those voting against? Councillor Davidson, Councillor Pavlidis, Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Yildiz and Councillor Carly Hannon. So that's 6-5. So I declare that carried. We'll move on back to item 7.1, options to increase funding for the arts in Merri-bek. Now, I was hoping to move this motion, and I'm happy to move the officer report. Is there a seconder for this? Is that Councillor Tapanos to second? Great. I'll speak briefly to this. So really appreciate council officers' work on this report. Earlier this year, we asked officers to look into innovative ways we could fund the arts, artists and art organisations in Merri-bek. Artists and the creatives that live in our community and work here contribute so much of what we love about our city, and the housing crisis that we've just been discussing particularly impacts people working in the arts or creative industry, as wages can be lower or income can be not as secure. So there's a chance that there's a real risk that our creatives are priced out of the city. On the other hand, we want to increase the support we as council can provide to artists in our community. So this is like a progress report. Council officers have looked into a few different options, whether we set up a philanthropic trust to fund the arts, whether we can devote some of our capital works program to public artwork, and what mechanisms we could use for the planning system to better support arts here in our city. So this is kind of providing a status update and also requesting the development of a Merri-bek public art policy in 2025 that includes a percentage for public art to be allocated from the council capital works budget, which is what some other councils do. It also is looking at seeking a report in 2025 for how council could request inclusion of public art and arts infrastructure in significant developments through the planning process, and further information about whether we should set up a philanthropic fund to fund the arts. So yeah, just really appreciate council officers' work here. Pleased to see it going on, and looking forward to the further results of the work to come. Councillor Tapanos, the seconder.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I also support this motion. It's good to see some innovative thinking around philanthropic sort of contributions that could be obtained to support the arts. It's also well worthwhile having a look at our strategies in regards to public art, and our investment in that area has been lacking for a number of years. However, our investment in the arts more generally has been substantial. At this council with the Saxon Street Arts and Community Hub, and also some arts grants that were very valued and useful during the COVID years. So I think that this is an ongoing piece of work as well that we need to do to support our arts community. I'd like to also just foreshadow for the next meeting, I'll be moving a notice of motion to see how we could actually get more arts in the Brunswick Town Hall, and expand the Cunahan Gallery as well to really exhibit our local artists on a permanent basis as well. So I think that there's a lot of innovative and new things and ongoing thinking that needs to occur around how we support our arts community, and this is just a small step in the right direction. So I urge councillors to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Pavlidis.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I don't really have anything further to add. Both yourself and Councillor Tapanos said it efficiently. My only thing was to slightly amend what the officer recommendation was, just to reword it or maybe move it around a little bit. There was an amendment circulated earlier, just so that it reads a bit more clearer. I'm not changing any of the proposal or the resolution, just the readability, I guess.
So are you seeking to move an amendment to the motion?
Yes.
And,
yes.
And that,
I
and
think it was circulated 7 o'clock, I think.
yes, I saw that. I thought my reading of it, a reason I didn't move that is because it actually changed the substantive of the officer rec. So I'm not supportive of that. If you wanted to bring up words.
I'm just trying to understand where you think it changed the officer recommendation.
So if you want to move it, if you want to move an official amendment, you can choose to do so. Would you like to? Okay, so we might get that. Well, it's an alternative. So I guess, yeah. So we're going to get it put on the screen, and then we'll see if there's a seconder. So hang on, that's not the right one.
Mayor, I would suggest that the wording doesn't change the intent of the motion at all. It's just grammatical, and I don't understand as a primary school teacher why we need to do that. That's all.
All right, thank you, Councillor Riley. We'll just get it on the screen so that.
Yeah.
I know it's not the right one. I've just sent it in the chat. So we'll see if there's a seconder for this. And then I'm happy to contribute to debate about why I chose not to move this. But we'll wait for the formal debate. So is there a seconder? So the officer recommendation which I've moved is above. This one turns 1 and 2 into 1A and 1B. My issue is the mechanisms for how council should request inclusion of public art and arts infrastructure shouldn't be part of the Merri-bek public art policy. So is there a seconder? No, okay. All right, so there's no seconder, so we won't have that amendment moved, so we'll continue debating the officer recommendation. Is there any person that wishes to contribute to debate? We'll move on to, there were no speakers against, so no right of reply, so we'll move on to voting. All those in favour? This is item 7.2. I can declare that unanimous. Sorry, item 7.1, sorry everyone, item 7.1. But I think we were clear on that. Any objections? We'll move on to item 7.2. So that's shared mobility e-scooters update. Councillor Hart? Yeah.
Yeah, look, my apologies because in a number of different documents floating around. So if I can just explain, I wanted to know. I just wanted to make sure what we got up was the alternative resolution that was passed by Anita at 5:57.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so did you want to confirm that that's the right one?
And what I am doing as part of moving that is I'm actually substituting, which I circulated at 7:34.2. I don't know if people have got the new point 2.
Yes, I think that is it.
Yeah, so that's what.
Okay, great, okay. No, it's all right. Councillor Bolton is happy to second. So can we just fix up, I think there's a couple of errant spaces and stuff in number 2. Just some grammar.
Yeah, that's my typing.
That's okay. So Councillor, you've got a seconder, so go ahead and speak to your alternative.
Before, can you confirm which resolution we're speaking to?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, can you see it projected? Can you see the screen being projected?
Yeah, but there's a lot of reading.
Okay. Could I ask governance to email that around to all councillors? So just check your inbox in a minute or two, but we might let the Councillor Hart start speaking to it. So we just need to renumber them as well. Thanks, Councillor Bolton. So I think, Councillor Hart, you can begin speaking.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. I don't think this changes the intent of what the original motion that was circulated by the officers. I think what it does, more than anything, is just flesh out some of the process. And I think that's really important because bearing in mind that this is something that's going to come back before council next year. So it won't come back in the life of this council. So I think to be able to ensure that this motion reflects some of the broader thinking it is a really important part of the process. It's been put together by a number of councillors who've really cooperated, and I guess also thank you very much to the work that the director has done to bring it together. Essentially around shared mobility scooters, e-scooters. What we've got is 3 processes. We've had the motion or the moving around Merri-bek proposal that was before council in March 24, which talked about that we undertake a feasibility study to determine whether shared mobility is suitable for Merri-bek, what policies may be needed to reduce footpath parking and riding. We've also had processes where the state government have been involved in a trial with 3 councils since 2021. That has ended. And so we've also got councils, inner city Melbourne councils, who are now joining together to look at how they will jointly negotiate and manage the process of procurement policy. So what the motion, I think, tries to bring together is those 3 processes to ensure that we've got processes of consultation that involves the community. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for the scooters. There's also a lot of concerns that what we don't get is the blocking of footpaths. We don't get the riding of the scooters on the footpaths, which is an inherent problem if you get the parking on a footpath. So we acknowledge all the sort of the balancing that needs to occur. The report that the officers have put together, I think, draws out some really good points, particularly from the trial that was done with council, the problems of that it can encourage riding on the footpath. I also really point out the importance of trying to get the behaviour, get it right that once you've got a trial in place, it's often very, very difficult to change poor behaviour patterns, particularly with parking. So what this motion seeks to do is put in train that we still do the procurement policy process with the other inner city councils. We simultaneously look at what we develop as a policy here to strengthen how we actually get that balance right between what the scooters and the requirements of pedestrians.
So, Councillor Hart, if you could conclude.
A framework to do that.
Thanks so much. Okay, so Councillor Bolton is seconder.
Yes, I am very pleased that Councillor Hart has made all of these amendments. I think it's a much, much better resolution now. My concerns about this is really from a disability perspective, and not just in terms of mobility, people with mobility issues, but people with low vision, especially people who use a white cane to get around. And certainly the picture of the Yarra Council parking for scooters, I think it was Yarra, I think that would not work for people with low vision who use white canes to get around. And I'm particularly concerned that at each of the stages, before there's any kind of procurement of infrastructure, etc., that people there's really good advice about accessibility, and certainly concerns were raised by the member of the Disability Reference Group of the Council who has low vision. I think she's the only person on the Disability Reference Group who's got low vision. So it was really this particular person who raised some alarm bells about some of the issues, not to say they're unsolvable, but I think we've got to make sure we've got very good quality advice on accessibility, not just mobility, but also low vision. And, you know, I think e-scooters have become really, really popular. And, you know, so it is important that we really get this right. Even within the Disability Reference Group, there was some concern about the technology to try and prevent drink riding, etc., focusing on cognitive tests, which might discriminate against people who've got cognitive disabilities. Now, some cognitive disabilities might preclude you from really using a scooter, but other people who might have cognitive disabilities might be quite okay to use a scooter, but some of these sort of technical, you know, IT kind of solutions might really discriminate against people who, you know, have quite a good capacity to ride scooters, but have cognitive disabilities. So I think that's my main concern. And also in Merri-bek, as a lot of local government areas, it's very different to the City of Melbourne, the CBD, where there's wide footpaths. We've mostly got, for the most part, very narrow footpaths, except for maybe Glenroy's the only place I can think of where there's wide footpaths in the main part of the shopping centre. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour?
Sorry, Mayor, I had my hand up to say something.
You didn't have your hand up, I asked, and...
I did. I had my hand up.
Okay, all right. Well, hang on, I'm just going to have to get advice because we were just voting, so I'll just get some governance advice. Sorry, Councillor Pavlidis, I don't know what happened. I was looking at the screen, but I couldn't see your hand. So I'd already moved on to the vote, and so the advice is that we should continue with the vote. So,
that works. You can go back and see it. My hand is up.
I understand that. So, so we're voting on that. So I'll call a division because I think people will be interested in that anyway. So we'll just proceed with voting. So all those in favour? Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos. All those against? Any abstentions? Councillor Pavlidis abstaining and Councillor Tapanos didn't vote. He did? Okay, sorry, and you were voting in for?
I'm voting in favour.
Okay. All right. So I declare that carried. Item 7.4, Glenroy to Coburg Bike Route Survey Outcome. Do we have... Sorry. Item 7.3, O'Hay Street Bike Lane Extension. Councillor Bolton to move. Is there a seconder? Councillor Conlon. Councillor Bolton is mover.
I'd like to move the officer recommendation with an extra point 4 and paragraphs renumbered afterwards. I circulated it earlier. Yes, great.
So we'll just make sure we can see the full on screen. Now, so you're adding a point. You're adding a point 4. Receives a report on number of crashes at Main Street. That's acceptable to the your seconder? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Bolton, go ahead.
I think it's great that this is being proposed. It's been a long time coming. I think something like 10 years. And I think, you know, I've certainly had a lot of contact with people who've wanted to see this bike path extended, and I'm glad that the officers are recommending that where it crosses O'Hay Street, at that sort of kidney bean roundabout, that that the bit in the middle, the island, be expanded to be able to accommodate cargo bikes, because I was a little bit worried about that, about cargo bikes or trailers sticking out into the traffic. But I think this will be, this is a really important east-west route, and, you know, will really increase ability for people to get around. But I also noticed the report has recommendations about improvement of safety on cross streets that enter O'Hay Street where the shared path currently exists, and I do agree that those are dangerous. It talks about recommendations for where the bike path unofficially goes across the railway crossing, and that being dangerous, and advocating to the various state authorities. But what it doesn't mention is Main Street, where there have been a lot of serious crashes, especially of people on bikes, really serious crashes. I no doubt potentially pedestrians and skaters, but I'm really only aware of people on bikes. And there's a range of things that make that a particularly dangerous crossing. And even though the council did a few years ago make some changes to try and make it a safer crossing, it hasn't fully resolved the issues. There's a lot of terrified residents, some people who take their kids down Main Street so they're crossing in the middle of the street rather than at the intersection. So that's why I've added this extra point.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, also happy to support this. Yeah, as Councillor Bolton said, it's a long time coming. It's been on our capital works list for a very long time. And yeah, it is a really good report. Does look like quite a sort of complex project to deliver. And I think it's really great how, you know, council officers have worked really constructively with the local community in ironing out quite a lot of complex and specific design challenges along the way. And you can tell that the officers have really taken on board the feedback and expertise of locals in the direct area. You know, for example, minimising tree loss and sort of widening some of the crossings for pedestrians, also addressing some of the other conflict points along the existing part of the bike path. So yeah, it does look like it's going along really well and really bringing the community along with us. And I think it's really great to see that. And it's really good. It was an interesting report just to see how much detail there is in it and how much work has been done to sort of iron out all these like complex issues. And yeah, just getting on with building this important missing link.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We might move on to a vote. So all those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to item 7.4, Glen Road to Coburg Bike Route Survey Outcome. Do I have a councillor wishing to move a motion? Councillor Hart to move, and a seconder, Councillor, I might go with Councillor Rowley, sorry. So Councillor Hart to speak to.
Thank you. This is the outcome of the consultation and the survey around Glenroy to Coburg bike route survey outcome. And I guess just noting that really what gave rise to this was the process and the resolution that came post the decision not to for the trial at Kent Road to cease, and that wasn't then protected bike lanes. And I think we all remember that process was one that was protracted and painful and I think very polarised. And my feedback and what I've understood from talking to people in the community is that I think I've had a general feeling that they felt that this consultation process was a very productive one. It's just people I've talked to around the traps. And we heard tonight, Nick spoke about the endorsing this resolution. It's interesting that what's been endorsed from that consultation is the Kent Road, Derby Street, as being the main key route for that Glenroy to Coburg as a main route, but it's also come up with recommendations around additional elements, which is more of the lighting in KW Joyce Reserve, pedestrian crossing outside the Pascoe Vale Health Centre are two key parts of that, more immediate. There's no more treatments on Kent Road. But I think one of the important, processes has been, and Nick talked about it tonight, was the advocacy and the discussion really about alternative routes and looking at Pascoe and Boundary Road as well. And that's really, that's a very challenging to look at what bike treatments are going to be possible there. But I think that piece of advocacy work is, I think, one of the really productive parts that's come out of consultation. And I think it just shows how difficult it is and challenging to look at how we manage getting safe and protected bike routes down in our community. And I would hope that this is a really, I guess, the start of community being able to come together. I think that's what I'm hearing most from this process. So I certainly, and the other part is that while there wasn't the decision to go ahead with the treatments that were, some of the treatments that were being posed around the shimmy route, there are recommendations really looking at some of the concerns and some of the safety concerns on that route, which are addressed as part of this proposal. So I think it's done a pretty good job of trying to pull together a really, really difficult challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Riley, a seconder.
No, I've nothing further to add. I think Councillor Hart covered most of it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Any other councillors wish to contribute to debate? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? I think Councillor Carly Hannon, I think that might be unanimous if Councillor Carly Hannon was voting for. Okay, we're going to assume that. So all those in favour? All those against? Oh, okay, yes. Sorry. All right, and any abstentions? So we might just need to note that Councillor Carly Hannon wasn't able to vote on that one, but apart from that, it's declared, yeah, I can declare it unanimous. Okay, so we're on to item 7.5, Victoria Street Streets for People project. Councillor Riley, no? Sorry. No conflict of interest. Do you want me to do conflict of interest? Oh, okay, sorry. Is there a conflict of interest on this? So there's not?
No.
No, okay, so... Oh, okay. I was very confused.
sorry.
So you're hoping to move this?
I'm hoping to move
Okay,
this
great.
motion.
And sorry, and Lambros, were you hoping to second this?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so Councillor Riley, mover. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies, and thank you to Councillor Tapanos for seconding. Look, this is a great initiative to see happening on Victoria Street. We, as a council, are committed to doing more for pedestrians and bike riders in our city, and as is sort of raised in a question time this evening, there were many submissions in the previous budget, so a year ago, that was calling for this. There was a bit of a concern that was an underspend on investment in bike lanes, which I often agree with, because we don't have near enough the money to invest in bike lane extensions and improvements, but that was a great way to have people express their concerns. And as we've now produced a new transport strategy and refreshed it, the Streets for People Streets for People initiative is a great way to continue that work. And what we're proposing now is to actually extend it to the western side of the Upfield Railway line. There's been some really good community participation. I don't share the concerns that were raised tonight. The concepts that were put up, it's important to give people concrete things to choose from rather than give them too many options. And I think that the process has been a relatively good one to date. We could always do more engagement and more participation, that's undeniable, but you need to round it up at some point and get on with the work. So I'm really grateful to the work the officers have done and the community input, and look forward to this. And then one day in the future, we'll actually address the remaining stretch between Sydney Road and the Upfield bike path, which is going to be at a later stage. But I just want to sort of round off by saying that the infrastructure plan has hundreds and hundreds of items stretching over 10 years now, and so we can bring things forward and move them back, and I'm just glad that we were able to actually get onto this one a bit earlier than perhaps was anticipated some years ago. So thanks to everyone who's involved, and look forward to getting the support tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos, the seconder.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's also with great pleasure to be able to second this motion and see it finally in this chamber. I know it's something that a lot of councillors have spoken about, and I should acknowledge the mover, Councillor Riley, and also Councillor Conlon, who have all spoken to me about this, and we've discussed this project many times, and it's a great sort of priority for the South Ward, and it's finally great to see it in the chamber. What I like most about this project is because it does link to the Upfield shared path. It is on a road that is designated to be a pedestrian and cycling access road, and it just makes a lot of sense. And I know that a lot of community members in and around Victoria Street are really excited because it will increase cycling and make cycling more safer on Victoria Street. We know that part of this motion also is to investigate and advocate for lower speed limits on Victoria Street. It is currently considered by many cyclists to be unsafe, and we hope by decreasing the speed limits and including separated bike lanes, we would encourage more people to cycle and use Victoria Street to link into the Upfield shared path, and of course go right down to the creek and to Sydney Road one day as well. And of course it would be cyclists, but with the previous motions that we moved today about e-scooters, you'll see a lot more e-scooters being on these paths as well. So fully supportive of this project and look forward to it being implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Do any other councillors, Councillor Bolton, wishing to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to just say a few words. I mean, I'm certainly fully in support of this project, and I supported this project being brought forward in the council budget last year. I think it was last year. I also hope that as part of this project, we look at the crossing near the train line. Now, I know that this will all change when the train line level crossing removal happens and we get Skyrail and so forth. But at the moment, it is quite dangerous for pedestrians to cross. But also, I think the other thing, just thinking about this report and this project, this being part of the strategic cycling corridor, I feel that we need to better mark what are the strategic cycling corridors and principal cycling corridors, etc. Because I think for people who don't currently ride bikes, that often it's sort of a bit unclear. And so therefore then sometimes I think this particular project is very popular, so I don't think this will fall victim to, big community debate. But I think, because strategic cycling corridors is a bit like a freeway. With a freeway is very visible, like a car freeway, I mean. And in a sense, we need to dramatise that certain streets have been designated as strategic cycling corridors with signage and so forth to give people an indication that these particular streets are meant to give some level of prioritisation of other forms of transport other than cars. Whereas sometimes I feel that this isn't just regarding this project, but sometimes that's a bit invisible to people who aren't regular cyclists. And I think that would also help us with some of our cycling projects.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Conlon?
Also, really happy to support this project. It's also been on our list for a while. And I think also just reading through the report again, it does seem like there's a lot of complex issues which are being worked through by officers and also with members of the community, which I think is really good. Stuff around car parking and working out, some of the parking restrictions and with regard to some of the businesses that are located on there as well. There's some complexities to work out on the eastern side between the Upfield Railway Line and Sydney Road. A staged approach seems like a pretty smart idea. And really good to see that 77% support option 1, which is the bike lanes on each side of the street protected. Also issues to work out with the bus company as well, but it does seem like they're kind of all being proactively and constructively worked through with all the relevant stakeholders and community groups. So I think it's another example of like one of these projects being done really well by really engaging meaningfully and proactively with lots of members of the community early on to really iron out all the issues and being transparent with us councillors and the community about exactly what the project is and what the challenges are. I think it's really good and really happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Pavlidis.
I basically just have a question for council officers, if I may.
Go ahead.
On the preferred option, I'd like to understand why the widths do not meet the Australian standards. We have, for example, parking lane at 2.1. The average width of a motor vehicle is 1.9 metres. The Australian standard is between 2.4 to 2.6. So if the average width of a car is 1.9, factor in utes, because there's quite a few businesses there that don't have vehicles, as in utes and vans and stuff, they're not going to fit in that parking lane.
We'll take that question about why it doesn't meet Australian standards. So we'll go to the Director of City Infrastructure.
I would have to take that on notice, Mayor.
Okay. So we can't provide an answer.
A follow-up question then. If this has been taken on notice, considering voting on this, is there an opportunity to tweak it based on what the Australian... Sorry, I'm not sure if you heard all that.
So you're asking whether we can amend this now? Are you seeking to move an amendment?
Well, my question is because there was from minor tweaks done to it after consultation, but I'm surprised that the Australian standards were not factored into the concept design. So if this gets approved tonight, what possibility or what leeway do we have for it to comply with standards?
Okay, so you're asking what changes can be made after the decision tonight.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Pavlidis, the widths of the lanes are somewhat constrained by bluestones, so that might be something that comes into account. In terms of the final implementation, the officer recommendation does authorise, if accepted, the Director City Infrastructure to make changes in the detailed design process to satisfy our road safety audit recommendation and so on. So if those things do come up through a road safety audit, then if council resolves as per the officer recommendation, then we would be in a position to fine-tune the design to respond to that.
Just to clarify, the bluestone you were referring to, though, is not on the actual road. It's not the footpath. It's the actual road where the vehicles will be parking. So there wouldn't be any bluestone there, just to clarify.
So, okay, so the director said that changes could be made after a road safety audit had been completed. I understand the Australian standard can vary depending on location. So the director took that original question on notice because I imagine we have to look for those instances. This may be one of those instances where it does vary. But nevertheless, we've heard process-wise that changes can be made to for the road safety audit. Sorry, the director has some further information to add.
Yes, so I have been advised that the parking standard requires 2.1 metres, so that is what.
Okay, so this is a different location. So, yes. All right. So, do we have any councillors wishing to contribute to debate? We may move on. There was no clear speech against, so there's no right of reply. So we'll move on to voting. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? All right, I declare that carried. I might just call a division on it, just so we've got it. So, sorry, all those in favour? Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos, Councillor Tapanos. All those against? Nobody, and abstentions? I believe Councillor Pavlidis abstained at the last vote. Councillor Pavlidis, are you hoping to abstain again? Councillor Pavlidis might be not able to hear me. Yeah, but when we did a division, but now that we've done a division, I have to count it again. So I can't mark that as an abstention. So I'll just mark that as a no vote, I guess. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Pavlidis, can you hear me? Can somebody else try? Councillor Tapanos, can you hear me? Yes, okay. So Councillor Pavlidis must have lost sound. So I think we just have to mark that there was no vote. Can somebody message Councillor Pavlidis and make sure she can hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I declare that carried. We did a division, and Councillor Carly Hannan's re-entered the meeting just after we'd done that division. So we're on to item 7.6, food system strategy. I can see Councillor Bolton is on her feet. So seeking to move?
So I'm seeking to move an alternative that was circulated earlier this afternoon.
Okay, so your alternative is adding a, yes.
This is the one, yeah.
Great, so we need a seconder for that. So Councillor Conlon's keen to second. Yeah, Councillor Bolton.
Okay, for those who might be watching the meeting, the amended resolution requests a feasibility study to determine the accommodation needs of food relief organisations in Merri-bek, including the advantages and disadvantages of various options such as use of existing council buildings, long-term lease and property acquisition. So I'm totally in support of the food system strategy, but I have felt for some time that it needs to not only look after the question of urban agriculture and community food enterprises and so forth, but it needs to also look at the question that we're in an incredible cost of living crisis, which means that not only very poor people, but people who've got full-time jobs, like someone who I've been contacted from Faulkner, she's actually a state public servant, and she must get, flexi time, and she has to drive around looking for a food bank that she can access. And because she is a full-time worker, she has to also go through the bureaucratic step of finding a social worker who will refer her to a food bank, because most food banks require you to have a Centrelink card, which not everyone is eligible for. So we are in a huge crisis, and I've been particularly wanting council to do something more in this space. Now, it is primarily federal and state government responsibility, but basically there's not a single level of government, whether state, federal or local council, which is trying to address this issue of food relief. And what's evident from one of the attachments to the report is if you look at most of there's only 2 agencies that get funding from the federal government. So that means that all of the other volunteer organisations are all unfunded. But the advantage that most of them have, whether they're neighbourhood houses or church-connected charities, is that they have access to a venue. There's really only 2 that have no access to an actual venue, a proper venue, and that is Nourishing Neighbours and Muslim Women's Council. So, but these organisations, which are 100% volunteer-run, no government funding, have people referred to them from funded government organisations such as Salvation Army and Sis Merri-bek. So I think I'm glad, well, I'm putting forward, I'm hoping councils will vote for this, the food system strategy with this amendment that we investigate the question of a venue. And I'd just lastly like to end on 2 extra points, is that I think as part of this process, we should be looking at strategically locating community gardens around the municipality. There's very few, or there are some, but not enough. And also, as well as recognising...
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Conlon as seconder.
Yeah, happy to support the motion, and also particularly the last amendment around council facilities. I think, Councillor Bolton's talked about this quite a bit around how, one of the key challenges for these volunteer community organisations is finding access to facilities. So, I know council, can't fund everything and give heaps of money to every single group, but I think, seems like an easy, low cost thing we can do, which is to provide facilities where we can.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm rising to support this motion. I'm sort of a little bit weak on this additional top point that Councillor Bolton's spoken to, and she's already explained to herself that it's really not our duty. It's something that the federal and state governments should be resourcing. The food system strategy, I want to acknowledge former Mayor and Councillor Natalie Aboud, who spoke earlier, who's in the chamber, or in the gallery rather, and has helped really bring some energy to this policy 7 years ago, and really get the sort of that iteration of the food system strategy together. And good questions tonight, but again, I don't think the food system strategy is actually going to address every person in need of food and making sure they're getting food on the table. It will indeed support it and actually make it better when people are actually growing their own food or doing community activities to do that, and we are funding that. The Director Fennessy talked about the contribution we're making in the current budget and what we're doing in the next 2 or 3 years. All important and really valuable and necessary. And yes, I'm okay about having a feasibility study, but if we can't fund every volunteer group, no matter how noble it is, the cause. And if we had lots of capital and we had lots of money to invest, I would be wanting to really go down the road of something like this and getting the federal and state government to do this. But given all the other priorities, I think they need to be stepping up and making sure there's food on the table for people who really can't afford it, and supporting our food system at the same time. So I just wanted to I think the focus of this strategy was to actually encourage people to be growing their own food or doing it with neighbours, taking over public spaces. We've had grants go out this year. Councils have moved motions around that. That's all really important and valuable because it's getting people growing food in a changing climate, in a climate emergency, and that's what we need to be doing. I do like the idea of addressing this issue of people who are not getting food on the table, but it's not really our principal concern as a council, because yes, we should be worried about it, but to make it happen, it's a huge investment, and I think it's probably a bit of a distraction from the fact that the food system's about encouraging people to take the power into their own hands to grow and get food growing locally. So well done to the officers, and I just want to actually finally finish up by saying on point 6 in the summary of what the thrust is here, we are advocating and we're leading the charge with other councils, saying we want the state government and the federal government to get their own food system strategies going and getting regional food system strategies going to precisely address the issues that Councillor Bolton is dealing with as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions?
Sorry, I'm unaware of what we're voting for, which officer's recommendation. I lost them.
Okay, so we can just redo that vote. So we're voting on item 7.6, whether to pass or to reject it. So all those in favour?
So is it with amendments? I don't know. Is it the officer recommendation or with an amendment?
So it's just the officer recommendation. There's no amendments. Oh, sorry. It's on the screen. So there's 2 changes. In clause 1, public exhibition from the 17th of June to the 8th of July, 2024. And then the 5th point, this was emailed earlier today, request a feasibility study is undertaken to determine the accommodation needs of food relief orgs in Merri-bek, including the advantages and disadvantages of various options such as the use of existing council buildings, long-term lease or property acquisition. So, Councillor Pavlidis, you're happy to participate in the vote? Yep. All those in favour? I can declare that carried unanimously. We'll move on to item 7.7, contract award RFT 2023-574, panel for provision of solar public lighting for design, supply, installation and maintenance. Councillor Riley seeking to move? Yeah, Councillor Panopoulos to second. Councillor Riley.
And I don't have a conflict of interest to declare. 7.7. This is rather exciting to see that we're going out to get more lighting happening, which is powered by solar. The contract amount doesn't exceed $1 million, but it's a really important initiative as part of our effort to get down to zero emissions and to address the climate emergency at the same time. So I think this is a great improvement because there's a win-win, or you get 2 things for the price of 1. You get better lighting and better focus lighting, because these are all things that are coming with the new technologies of lighting, but we're also getting to power it with renewable energy and technology as well. So well done to the officers in preparing this, and wholly support it. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Panopoulos, the seconder. Nothing further to add. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that carried unanimously. Move on to item 7.8, contract RFT 2024-2, Wheatsheaf Road streetscape improvement. Do I have a councillor wishing to move a motion? Councillor Panopoulos? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hart, Councillor Panopoulos.
Great, thanks, Mayor. So this has been a project that's been in the pipeline for quite a while, and one that we've gone through quite a long community engagement process about, and we've had many, many conversations at council meetings and at briefings and with the public and residents about it. So this is quite exciting about making that formal offer to get that work going. It's taken quite a while to tee it up in terms of the it being a bus route and the different considerations with the traders and making it more accessible and easy for people to get around that core spine in Glenroy that connects up Pascoe Vale Road, the new train station, and also the Glenroy hub. So this is really exciting and will provide as well, perhaps what I'm most keen for is some trees that actually give some shade and make it a lot easier to get around and increase the visibility, because we know that the old trees that were there did create a bit of a boxed in feeling, and so this will bring in that sunlight, make it more comfortable for people, help out on those really hot days. And so it's really exciting to see this actually coming about, and I'll be really keen to see it all finished. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Hart as seconder. No worries. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 7.9, contract variation RFT 2021-2030, 14 Frith Street, Brunswick, Park close to home. Do I have someone seeking to move? Councillor Riley to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, unfortunately, this variation is coming back to us once more. Whilst we're very proud of our work on Park Close to Home and getting public open space for our increasing populations, unfortunately, this former industrial site has revealed far more risks than we anticipated. And so the overrun on contingency is now sort of up, instead of like a 10% contingency, it's now up towards almost 60%. So it's asking that we contribute another $534,044.53, exclusive of GST. But to not continue this now would be a bit of a failure on my view. So I think we're caught between a rock and a hard place, and sorry that we're having to sort of dip into our capital to do this, but it's an important project. We want to get it finished by the end of the year.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Panopoulos, nothing to add. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? So we're voting on item 7.9. All those in favour? All right. Yeah. All those against? I assume. And any abstentions? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Ms. Mayor, I'm against the Frith Street variation. There might have been a small delay in putting my hand up.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just call a division so we can do that vote again. All those in favour? So Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Panopoulos. All those against? Councillor Tapanos. Any abstentions? Councillor Pavlidis, Councillor Bolton. So I declare that carried. All right. So we'll move on to item 7.10, contract variation RFT 2022-287, provision of an integrated parking solution or incorporation of optional items into contract. Do I have a mover? I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Panopoulos. So as the mover, I'll speak. This varies a contract of that provides parking solutions. It seeks to add a few extra things to it, including a new system to manage infringement notices. While there's some expenses for this contract, it's anticipated that having this new system will bring efficiencies which actually save us money, and part of it will be cost neutral over time. So happy to support this. Councillor Panopoulos is seconder. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Councillor Pavlidis.
I don't want to speak to it, but I've got a question. Now, officers advise this in the contract extension. Now, we currently have pods or sensors, whatever you call them. The current contract that we have, just seeking clarification here, the current contract that we have is for them to monitor and replace the sensors that we currently have, should they need to. Is that correct?
So I'll refer to the Director of City Infrastructure.
Sorry, my microphone was playing up. Yes, through you, Mayor. Councillor Pavlidis, the current contract for sensors is to make sure that they are maintained in working order across all of our existing parking sensor sites, and if there are any new ones to be implemented, that would be done as well.
Thank you to the Director. Councillor Pavlidis, any further questions?
Yes, I'm just wondering, considering we already have this contract and that includes the sensors and the monitoring and so forth, I'm just wondering, all the other services like the portal and being able to do things online, generally speaking, that can be done online now. Anybody wishing to submit a review or pay an infringement can do so online at the moment, as we currently have. I'm just wondering whether would we not be better off if it's to do with resourcing this additional, what is it, $10 million odd, give or take? Are we not better resourced to, I don't know, maybe employ additional staff to do this rather than
Okay,
resource
so
issue?
are you trying to debate now, or are you asking a question?
That was my debate.
Okay, that was your contribution to debate? Okay. No, we have, yeah. So, okay, so we'll count that as a contribution to debate. So thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? Okay. All those against? Any abstentions? I declare that carried. Item 7.11, contract RFT 2023.
Division, I'll keep forgetting to take down mute, sorry.
Okay. So we've got a division called on the item 7.10, so we'll just run that through again. All those in favour? So Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Panopoulos, Councillor Tapanos. All those against? Councillor Pavlidis, any abstentions? Councillor Bolton, I declare that carried. Item 7.11, contract RFT 2023-504, provision of catering services. Do we have someone seeking to move? Councillor Riley, a seconder. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, look, this is just in another one of the contracts we need to do, make sure that we're functioning and continuing to go forward and keeping ourselves fed when we're having events and other occasions. I just want to note that one of our number 7 at the recommendation, which is the youth projects, the little social catering company, is one that's based up in the Glenroy and goes over the border, I believe, into Hume City. But it's one of the projects we've been supporting over the years. And it's great to see that they are now part of the panel of contractors that we'll be considering when we look to do refreshments, snacks and light lunches, as distinct from hot meals and events in Category B. So just to acknowledge the work of councillors on that, little bit of community coming back to service. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Seconder, I think, was Councillor Bolton. Anything? No. Any other councillors wish to speak in debate? So we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that's carried unanimously. Item 7.12, Financial Management Report for the period ended 30 April 2024. Do I have a mover? Councillor Conlon to move. Councillor Tapanos to second. Councillor Conlon.
Take it as read.
All right. Councillor Tapanos. Councillor
Nothing from me.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? This is item 7.12. And any abstentions? I declare that carried. Item 7.13, Open Council Resolutions Report. Councillor Riley to move. Councillor Tapanos to second. Councillor Riley.
Just to note that this is a good part of accountability for us, and thank Nick for his question time, sort of underscoring that work. It's not easy keeping track of everything, but it's really important that we do and that we're up and front and honest about why things are delayed or taking as long as they are, and this is a great way of doing it. Thanks to the officers for preparing it. Thanks.
Councillor Tapanos.
Nothing from me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? And I think I can declare that carried unanimously. Before we move on to item 7.14, I need to use the bathroom. So, Deputy Mayor Tapanos,
I'll do my best to chair.
Yeah, the CEO is happy to help as well in terms of being eyes in the room. I'll do my best to be speedy.
I can see everyone, so that's great. All right. So, councillors, we're up to 7.14, governance report. Are there any movers for this report?
Councillor Conlon has put up his hand.
Yeah, Councillor Conlon moving and Councillor
Panopoulos has put up a hand. Yep.
Yep, thank you, CEO. All right, Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, happy to move this. I nearly said move this report. It's our regular standing report, which reports on a whole bunch of, it's like an omnibus report. Yeah, I'll take it as read. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Panopoulos.
Just to chime in as well, that we are endorsing a new preferred candidate for the appointment as the community appointed member on the Inner North Community Foundation Board. And so this is a really valuable foundation that we've got that operates across a couple of the inner northern municipalities, and they provide really good grants and opportunities for local groups. So I think we went to one of their celebration grant announcements a couple of years ago, and some of their work has been around a lot of racial justice stuff, around sustainability and supporting people across a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. So this is something that I think we as Merri-bek should be quite proud of being a part of in this sense. And so this is just endorsing a new preferred candidate for that appointment. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers in favour of this motion? Any against? Okay, I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? All opposed? I declare that carried. Okay, councillors, thank you. That concludes officer reports. We can now move on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is notice of motions. And the first notice of motion that we haven't dealt with is 8.1, standards for enclosed dog parks. Councillor Bolton.
Okay. I don't know if you need a seconder first.
I do. If you're moving, councillor, I'll ask for a seconder. I see Councillor Angelica Panopoulos seconding. And Councillor Bolton, you can speak to the motion.
And Councillor Tapanos, I'm back in the room now, so thank you for sharing. But I might.
And back to you.
Thank you. So Councillor Bolton, yeah.
Okay, so this motion really stemmed from some discussion earlier this year when someone put forward a petition about getting shade in the dog park in Gilpin Park, particularly the part that's for small dogs. And I became aware of some of the issues with the dog parks and small dogs because I had no idea at that point that some of our dog parks, which are really incredibly appreciated, are constructed in a way that small dogs or very small dogs can escape. So it just really brought to mind the need for standards for dog parks, both making sure that the fences come right to the ground, making sure that there's water in both parts for large dogs and small dogs, that there needs to be shade where people gather to watch their dogs, that the fact that there need to be accessible latches on both sides of the gate so that people in wheelchairs or with limited mobility are able to open the gates and get in and out of the dog parks without any assistance from people. And I think in Faulkner, Merri-bek Park, dog park, which I've visited and I've had discussion with local residents about, it is something which people have raised about the lack of water in the small dog part of that park and the fact that there's so few, there's really no shade, which is especially a big problem in the middle of winter, in the middle of summer. So, so this is just looking to see what our standards are for enclosed dog parks. I understand there's several of the dog parks which aren't suitable for really small dogs. So I'd really like to see that rectified. I gather the dog park in Faulkner, there's some problems with being able to deliver a tap for water in the small dog enclosure. But anyway, I think we do need to have some solid standards, not just for the large dogs, but the small dogs. And I think, but already a lot of people are loving the dog park in Merri-bek Park, and I'm sure in Kingsford Grove Dog Park as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Sorry, I missed who was seconder. Councillor Panopoulos, nothing further to add. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that carried unanimously. On to item 8.2, improving community engagement for older non-English speaking residents. Councillor Pavlidis to move. Does Councillor Pavlidis have a seconder? Councillor Hart. Councillor Pavlidis to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very brief because I believe this is pretty much all self-explanatory. Most of you will be aware, most of our community engagement or consultation is done via conversations Moreland or social media and the emails that sort of go to our go-to groups, which is basically instant notification and allows maximum response during the time available to provide one. However, many of our older non-English speaking community members don't use social media, they don't have email addresses and aren't digitally savvy. By the time they are made aware, and it's often by word of mouth, submissions have closed. So I guess what I'm basically asking is just a review of our current policy, just to ensure that there is fair and equitable consultation with all members of our community so that everybody can have a say and not just those that do understand the English language. It's basically it.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Councillor Hart, a seconder.
Yeah, I commend Councillor Pavlidis for putting this NOM together, and I know she's spoken about it frequently. We both sit on the aged care reference group, and I know the number of times that it's discussed within that forum, but I think that we need the formal process to actually begin to question how we can do things better and what are the strategies, what we can do. I think that's a really, really important process. So I thank her very much for giving a more, I guess, a targeted way to address the challenge of how we do it, rather than, I think, the fact of just being able to, this is something we need to do. This is actually focuses it. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Panopoulos?
Thanks. Just briefly, and yeah, definitely speaking in favour of this item, and yeah, I think it is something important that Councillor Pavlidis has put on the agenda for this evening. I do, perhaps in this review that we do, which I note that the policy was from last year, but in this review that we do this year, I do hope that we can continue to build upon the great work of the community connectors that are already out there and working in non-English speaking communities from, you know, the northernmost parts of the municipality down into the south. They're a really valuable resource that we've got at council and started during COVID as a way to get out the messages around vaccinations and the different rules that were ever changing, and has morphed into this really excellent form of connection into various language groups or cultural groups or religious groups, and they're just an awesome group of people. So I hope that this can continue to lift and elevate the work that they're doing, as well as looking at how else we can engage with older non-English speaking residents. Of course, also noting that we often don't hear from the younger non-English speaking residents as well.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Bolton?
I won't move an amendment. I think the motion holds up as is, but really probably a big area, a big gap is with consultation or over planning decisions. And that's probably a bigger area than community engagement, where it's maybe not, some of the community engagement doesn't necessarily have such a big impact on people's lives compared to the planning decisions. And then with our various engagement policies, et cetera, the fact that Australia Post only delivers a couple of days a week now. And so there are some real challenges, but I haven't got wording, so I won't propose an amendment to this, because I think the community engagement policy is quite separate from the question of planning and inviting members of the community to respond to planning applications. That needs, something in its own right.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We might move on to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that carried unanimously. Item 8.3, customer service reporting, Councillor Pavlidis. Does Councillor Pavlidis have a seconder? Yeah, sorry, I think I saw Councillor Conlon first. So, Councillor Pavlidis to move.
Thank you. Didn't realise, I just remembered it was back to back. And thank you, and through you. This is actually quite difficult to put into words, as to try to sort of grasp everything that I wanted to sort of encapsulate. But I guess basically what I'm trying to achieve is that, for example, councillors are constantly emailed by our residents who are frustrated with not receiving responses or inaction on things that they've requested. Now, councillors do get reports on a monthly basis as to how we're tracking. We also have a customer service commitment, a charter, which is on our website, that says how we will respond and the time frame for response. There's also our info at Merri-bek email address, where my understanding is correspondence is registered into the system and transferred across to the appropriate department or officer for respond. Now, these are all mechanisms that are in place, but we don't actually, apart from the annual report that comes through, we don't really get or the community doesn't really get a report as such as to how we're tracking against all this. So what I'm proposing is that there's a mechanism where it gets reported on a quarterly basis, similar to the outstanding resolutions report, where there's a data that tells us how many CRSs, for example, how we're tracking, what we've received, what we've accomplished on time, how many are outstanding. So it's basically being transparent with our community for when they do contact us, and also what categories we're getting, more of, so that they can understand if there are delays and what those delays are. It's basically opening up the channels.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Councillor Conlon, a seconder.
Can I just ask a question of officers? We don't necessarily have this exact type of report at the moment, do we? And I know we collect this type of data generally, but we don't specifically have this, do we?
Through you, Mayor. So, Councillor Conlon, we don't publicly provide this data yet currently.
Okay, thanks.
You still happy to second? Yep. Do you want to speak to it?
I support it. I guess, I'm hoping that it's not a massive project or, sort of cost, but I think it seems like it's a decent thing to do. Like, it's a bit of transparency around customer requests, which are obviously a very important part of council business. I think a bit of public data and transparency around this is probably a good idea.
Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We move on to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that carried unanimously. On to 8.4, speed surveys and accessible tram stops for Nicholson Street, Coburg. Councillor Conlon. Now, does Councillor Conlon have a seconder? Councillor Bolton? Councillor Conlon.
So this, Helen Kratzman, who spoke to us earlier, kind of outlined it all pretty well, but as we know, the state government did commit finally to reducing the speed limit along Nicholson Street, and I think they will be soon, they're implementing the relevant infrastructure, the signage on Nicholson Street in order to deliver that speed reduction. So this is just a motion to make sure that we do some before and after traffic counts, so we can really see the effectiveness or not of that speed limit, to see whether motorists are actually abiding by it. So I think that data will definitely help, as Helen said, with our advocacy efforts. I also think that it's good for us to continue to raise the issue of accessible tram stops also on Nicholson Street, not to distract from the Sydney Road campaign, but I think we should still be asking for it, because we want this, we want them as many along our tram routes, as many of our tram routes as possible. I think that's a good thing to ask the Minister for an update on that. I don't think it's going to lead to delivering it overnight, but I think, these types of motions are all about continuing the community campaign to make Nicholson Street a lot safer.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Councillor Bolton.
So I think the question of a speed survey along Nicholson Street is self-explanatory. As the resident, Helen, who spoke earlier tonight, explained, it's to assist with advocacy, and surveys were quite important in order to get the pedestrian crossing on Nicholson Street outside the IGA a few years back. But on the question of accessible tram stops, we absolutely do need them. We need them. There's only 12% of tram stops across Melbourne that are fully accessible. That is an accessible stop as well as an accessible tram. So that is absolutely appalling. But I don't really believe we'll win them anywhere without significant campaigns to prove that there is community uproar about the lack of accessible tram stops. I moved the motion for there to be an accessible tram stop on the corner of Moreland Road and Home Street, to the beginning of Nicholson Street, a number of years ago, after that a pedestrian was tragically killed outside the IGA. Nothing, of course, happened about it, but I think there's been at least a little bit of movement around the Sydney Road issue since we started our campaign. So I think that's really where we have to go, like letters from council. I think we should do the letters from council, but we actually need a huge hue and cry from the community. Otherwise, we'll never get, all the deadlines have been and gone. December 2022 was when all public transport was meant to be accessible, and that deadline's been and gone, and not a single state government has implemented that. Doesn't matter what party's in power. So we've got to really create the momentum for this.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We will move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. We may need a extension of time shortly. We had that half-hour of tech issues, but we were still technically meeting, I guess. So we might just do that now before the next person speaks. So Councillor Panopoulos to move to extend it by 30 minutes. Councillor Riley to second. All those in favour? Yeah, I can declare that carried. So we're on to item 8.6, Union Square Shopping Centre, Grantham Street, by Councillor Tapanos. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillor Panopoulos. This is a bit of an issue that's been discussed by local residents a number of times, and a real acknowledgement in that perhaps the Union Square Shopping Centre isn't probably living up to its full potential, and there are a whole range of issues there that residents have spoken to me, and I'm sure many other councillors, about over the years in regards to cleanliness and amenity, but also what the shopping centre can be. And in that thought process, knowing that we have strategies around streetscape renewal, streets for people, that we talk about trams, and a whole range of other aspects that could also fit very nicely into this precinct, I thought it would be wise to call for a report that would ask officers to have a look at not just the activity centre itself, but how all of the other council strategies also work in this area, including our newly adopted open space strategy, which identifies the Union Square shopping area as the location of a neighbourhood park in the future. So I just think it needs a coordinated approach where we are talking and consulting the community and developing a bit of a vision, not just for the private shops and the Union Square Shopping Centre, but also the public realm. What does transport look like in the area, and where, how can we progress the new park that's envisaged in our strategy, and how can we improve the streetscape in and around Union Square Shopping Centre?
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Panopoulos, nothing further to add. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Item 8.7, Traffic Management in Brunswick Southwest. Councillor Tapanos is moving. A seconder, does Councillor Tapanos have a seconder? Councillor Bolton? Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Bolton. Yeah, these are some other issues that have been spoken to me recently at a community meeting around traffic management in this part of Brunswick West. There is a long-standing issue around rat running, particularly from Dawson Street to Park Street. And I think that although we have spoken about this many years in the past, it's an issue that now is at the point that it really needs traffic engineers to have a look at it in more detail. And as part of that work, it is also prudent to have a look at some of the intersections off Dawson Street, particularly at South Daly, at Pearson Street, to see how they can be improved for pedestrians and all road users as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Bolton. Nothing further to add. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that's carried unanimously. Lots of unanimous votes. We're on to our final item for this evening, 8.8, more bike parking near Louisa Street car park in Coburg. So Councillor Conlon's the mover. Do we have a second? Councillor Panopoulos to second? Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, another sort of fairly self-explanatory motion. yeah, basically there is quite a chronic lack of bike parking in the whole central Coburg area. Not just around Louisa Street, but around the Woolies and the Dan Murphys, those types of areas. Yeah, this is just a motion to see if we can get some more bike parking there. It's good to see that with Louisa Street, I didn't actually realise when I submitted the motion that we actually have started to we have incorporated some more bike parking into the design of the car park there, which is really good. So I've slightly amended it to be more of an advocacy motion to Woolies and Dan Murphys to see if we can get them to put some in just outside the shops there, because it's not actually our land, it's their land. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Yeah, but hopefully council support it tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Conlon, Councillor Bolton. Nothing for... Oh, sorry, Councillor Pedopoulos. Yeah, sorry. No, it's a ping pong between the seconders. All right, any other councillors wish to speak to this item? No, we'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. So that's the final of our notices of motion. We've got a couple of items just to rush through in terms of, well, there's been no notices of rescission. Now, do we have any foreshadowed items that people wanted to raise? Councillor Pavlidis.
I have a couple. One being contracts. Second one being the procurement policy in relation specifically to consultants. And the third one is in relation to submissions.
Okay, so you're going to move you're going to lodge 3 notices of motion for the next meeting on those topics? Yeah, and I think Councillor Tapanos, you foreshadowed something earlier. But
yeah, even though I foreshadowed it in the earlier report, I'm working on a notice of motion that would look at the Brunswick Town Hall, specifically expansion of the Coonahan Gallery to include exhibition of our permanent collection and also some historical sort of artifacts as well in partnership with the Historical Society. So it's just preliminary thinking at the moment, but I hope to be drafting a notice of motion for the next council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Any other foreshadowed items? We've had no urgent business lodged today. We also have no confidential items tonight. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here, to those in the gallery, for those following along at home. Thank you for your interest in our council and community. Have a good night. I declare the council meeting closed at 10:07 p.m. Thanks, councillors. Thanks, staff.